everybody, good morning and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne. And we're going vanilla with disembodied hands, Quindy, Justin, and John. Hi. No exciting intro today. I don't have enough brain cells for that. Dearie me. Let's see, what opportunity did I miss? Today is, okay. Today is apparently the Little League World Series. Okay, that's fine. We all know Quindy's the umpire anyway. Hello, 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 hello. Oh, yes. Yeah, I have no brain cells. I'm preparing for trip, so no brain cells. Yeah, the puppies have totally, puppy preparations have totally overwhelmed my brain. That and the necessity of getting my Patreon stuff done before I leave on the trip early on Friday morning. So yeah. Yeah. Oh, congrats on the job interview, Nomanzik. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Yeah, I feel like I could use that, Crowley, except my intestines disagree. Maybe I'll get a cup later. I kind of feel like I didn't sleep great last night. I woke up in like early morning and couldn't get back to sleep for a little while. Don't you hate it when that happens? Happy National Black Cat Day. Okay, so I missed that too. That's all right, though. Like, because what do you do when you're doing an intro on National Black Cat Day? Quindy is a black cat. I am a black cat. John and Justin are black cats. Alrighty. Well, I did a little bit of like just filler yesterday to start filling in this bit, or to give me a little bit of elevation and irregularity so that I could base around this. You're a spooky black cat. There you go. I'm going to be a dorky black cat like my last black cat was. He was a doofus. He was a total doofus. Alrighty. And this is to be expected because he was Mama-san's son. Alright, so we've got some rocks on the base. Let's do a quick wash over the base to establish what we've got and to decide if we're going to keep it. So let's grab a liner and some... I've got all this basing crap all over the place over here. And some sealer. Where is my brush on sealer? Oh no, brush on sealer. Where'd you go? There you go. Yay, brush on sealer. So I'm going to use liner, brush on sealer, make a heavy glaze to bring out the details on our base. Also need to fix the camera focus, apparently. So let's do that. Yeah, so there's some, I think there's some tree roots and stones, but I want to see the texture a little bit better here, so I'm going to do an initial coat of a brown liner, or Rogue Shadow works because it is a brownish liner. I don't know where my brown liner went. Maybe David stole it again. And I'm going to do heavier, when you're doing this, I go heavier with sealer if I'm going straight over the bones, so I don't make a straight up wash. I'm going to do a couple of drops of the Rogue Shadow, and normally I would do like 2 drops of sealer for every drop of liner, and then I do 2 drops of water, but I'm going to go a little bit heavier. I'm going to go 5 drops of sealer and 1 of water. And that's just because I'm going over the bare bones, material. Hey there, Zachariah. And since I'm going over bare bones material, I want a lot of sealer in it. So I'm going to mix that up. This should give me a fairly transparent liner prime for those of you who do a lot of the old bones, who did a lot of the old bones. You know that a lot of people used a brown liner wash or heavy surface wash to kind of seal and prep the bone surface for painting, because then the paint would stick to it better. So here I'm just using this as my initial dark brown, but it is technically quite a heavy wash, so it should also outline all of my details down here as it dries. Yeah. Like, it seems like every time I turn around, like, we either do have a problem with primers on bones or we don't. Like, it just seems like it depends on what you're doing, like which bones material and all that kind of thing. So, I mean, I always just don't prime, like, as you know. Because even though you've covered over that base layer with sealer and it seems to have fixed the problem, that underlying coat probably still hasn't cured properly. So be aware. It may not ever be a factor though, Crawley. Our white primer, Reaper's black brush on is more inert, I think. Our white primer is pretty hardcore, and if people are going to have problems, that seems to be like the one that they do. I've never had a problem with the black primer, or heard of problems, I should say. So I did kind of just a rough fill in with one of my modeling pastes around the edges here, and I left some texture so that I could use it to suggest just some more interesting ground when I started painting. So just to show you consistency here, this is how it's drying on the side here, so you can see it is a very heavy coat. Using the sealer instead gives it translucency without making it really watery. So it does tend to cling to the details better, and that's why I would use it over bare bones material. That's what makes it work. I mixed, it's not a proper wash. It's actually got a lot of sealer in it and very, very little water letting in. It's because I'm going over a bones material that has not been otherwise prepped except for washing. Many people will do something like this over bones to kind of set it up almost as a primer. It outlines the details. What I wanted was to outline all these details on the base so that I could see what I was working with. So I mixed up a mixture of 2 drops of Rogue Shadow, 5 drops of Brush On Sealer, and only 1 drop of water. It is not a wash. Washes typically have a bit more water in them. But this is technically a bones prime is what I would call this. Now, if you use a liner that is not as strong, for example, Death Knight Black, which is a very transparent liner, this is more the effect you get. So for this, you can see that using a more transparent color still outlines a lot of your details, but gives you a lot more white. So if you want a lighter base coat, then using a weaker liner will give you more of this, where it was just outlining your details. And it's still like coating very well. So I can still paint over this no problem. The paint will absolutely stick better than over the base bones material. But as you can see, and that's a thing that I did yesterday for my Patreon, so those of you in the $10 tier are going to be seeing that today. But yeah, but as you can see, it's nice for outlining all these areas, and it also sticks really nicely so that when you paint over it, all the paint adheres with no problems. But I did that so that he wouldn't overexpose on camera yesterday, so you can see an example then versus Rogue Shadow, which is a very high coverage liner, where you can see that it's very much changed the surface color of the gray that we started with. But it is still clinging around the edges, and it still is bringing out the details. I wanted a darker ground on this anyway, and I may end up putting down a lot of basting material as we go anyway, so it's like, yeah, you know. I'm still kind of on the fence as to how much, I wasn't going to do any green work on this base. I was just going to use basic materials, but it just depends. We're going to kind of look at it and see. If I do like a tree limb, I'm probably going to want to green stuff around that to kind of set it in, unless it's just lying on the ground. So let's look at some basing materials. He has tree roots and stones, and some texture on the ground. So Probably a foresty type base, just from the roots, tree roots. And I grabbed some stuff that I keep around, and I grabbed some of David's stuff, and he's a bigger model, although we aren't taking full advantage of the bigger model. But one product that I find is good on dioramas and bigger models is, this is Woodland Scenics. It's a product called Deadfall, and it is for dead trees and stuff. So essentially it's branches that they have treated. These are all too big for him. A lot of these are stuff like I've used these on bases for 54 millimeter or 75 millimeter dioramas, but they do typically come with a couple of smaller branches as well. So I was going to check in my deadfall and see if I had any more interesting branches left that are on the smaller side. That's a nice one. To see if they would fit on this base. You can also, of course, break up and chop up. This is a nice one for a log, too. You can break up and chop up these things, of course, too, if you want to. You can sometimes use the big ones. If they're shaped right, you can use them as trees. So, let's see. This one maybe, but... So, as dead trees. So, like, this one, if you propped it up and did a little bit of sculpting to be more like a root, you could use that. A lot of them are just really good, like, dead trees to lay over bases. They're just good. If I use these, I do paint them. I paint all basing material. And there's a nice crack in this one, which has a nice feature. But yeah, you could totally use this one. It'll sit up on its little roots. And you could use it as kind of a dead tree. You could base it into the ground down here. So there are also a lot of resin trees out there if you want tree stumps or tree trunks to work from. There are architectural design stuff and things like that. There's all sorts of tree simulacrums. There's no like really awesome low effort tree. Like to make it look good, you're always going to work. Like this is a really nice one, but it's too big for his base. But yeah, so I would prime these and paint them just like any basing item. They are really useful though if you are working with kind of a foresty type of theme or diorama. All right, so let's see. These are the little guys, and I'm not sure if any of them are going to work on the base because I really did not like base him on a big thing because I wanted to use his integral base, and I think like this guy is going to be too big. This one is more like a fire log kind of thing, and I don't think it really fits. It's a little out of scale too. It's really big, fat, and round. Now we've got these little guys, and they don't have as much character, right? Because they're not like as big. There are twigs and trees and species that will give you more variance in small pieces, and you can look at roots as well, which often will be a little bit more twisted and interesting. So yeah, but this is because a lot of the tree roots that are sculpted in here are very, they're sculpted into the loam, so they're really not standing out. So if you want to give more three-dimensionality than this, then that's when you would work with one of these guys, one of these little wood pieces. I'm just looking to see if there's like a good place for it. And if I did put it in, I could choose to like pin it and kind of sculpt roots around it, but I don't know that there's really a good... Because there's so much sculpted stuff on the base, I don't know that there's really a good place for it. If you're building up your own base with details, then probably this would be a little bit better. But trying to just plop it down on top of here, I'd want to use green stuff because I'd want to kind of sink it into the ground if I was going to do that. I'd want it to look not like it was just lying on top of the base, right? But I don't know that it really adds anything to the base because of just how he's standing and that the base is smaller. So I don't think that Deadfall is really the answer at this point on this particular base. Probably better if I had cut him off the base and mounted him on something that I could do myself, which would have been fun, but he's connected on his hocks, like all along this area, and the base is big and thick, and the tail is connected as well. So this would have been, although it makes the model moldable, this makes it a very hard cell to cut off. It's going to be a pain in the butt. So I would have had to want to really put some time in and make this a really cool model if I was going to do that much investment on it. Always kind of weigh, you know, your time and investment. You could be working on something else. So I'm always pretty selective as far as which models I'm going to put the extra effort into basing. Like, I have to really, really like the model. And I like this guy, but I didn't have a huge concept for a cool base for him. Oh, it's not a water effect, Twisted Oma. This is actually wet right now. It's drying. I wanted to do a wash to see the details. So I just did a heavy wash with liner. Although it's not really, as I point out, it's a lot of lacquer. It's not really a wash. So it is actually wet. If you wanted this sort of effect, which I wouldn't, because actually I want a matte finish on the stones and the roots. But if you wanted this sort of effect, you could get it by using a gloss sealer and then painting over the top of the gloss sealer onto the roots and the stones. Nope, just a wash. Very simple. We're not doing too crazy on this guy. We already sculpted like a dungeon floor for Kidde, so. And just because I'm getting down to the end of stuff. Now, some things I might use: gravel, static grass, and I raided David's moss collection. David has a lot of really cool little mosses. So obviously this guy is way too big, but you can see how this stuff makes cool basing details. Little pieces of mosslets. So these would be good basing probably to use on the base here. They're complicated, they're smaller, so they're not as, you know, as huge. They're not going to overwhelm the base. He's got a whole container of this stuff. I'm not sure where he got it or if he just picked it up. Let's see here. I want maybe a little bit more. And some of these work really well as little plants. There's a really good one. This one's a really good one. There, that would work great as a little plant. So, and these guys can be broken up again and used piecemeal. I'm just kind of sorting through his little collection here to see if there's more like little bits that I might want to use here. It's infinite. There's infinite moss in here. And some of this actually does make good tree root material. If you dipped it in glue, you could, you know, stick some of these fibers together and make this more of a tree root kind of effect. But I think I like that one. Maybe that one. And you could totally go down a rabbit hole with all this, of course. Some of these dead pieces are just good forest fall. Like, you could just glue these randomly onto the base. We might do that. So the tiny little pieces can give you, just like we did yesterday where we just glued a jumble of stuff onto the base, all this stuff, if I glue it onto here, will really make the base look very foresty. So I'm going to keep that. Steal a bunch of David's basing. Why not? I also have some ground up slate. Which can be a fun basing material. It's a little bit different than gravel because it's flat, because the way that slate fractures. So it gives you a slightly different surface. This stuff is pretty good for dried up, for like concrete. I think you can get something similar in like garden supply shops, although this was actually a hobby supply that GW sold ages ago. I also have one with bigger slate pieces. All right. So let's look at what we're going to do here. And at this point, I have to decide if I'm just going to really just hit this base with all of this litter and cover up a lot of what's already there. Which, considering that what's already there is sculpted pretty flat, like there's a couple of rocks that stand out more, but this stuff is probably a lot more interesting visually on the base. Like putting this guy, all of this stuff on there. So I think I'm going to do that. Now, when you work on a base, you want to start from the substrate layer and work up to bigger effects. So this is going to be some of the stuff we put on kind of after the first part. But first we want to figure out like what are we gonna do with like any gravel or really finely ground up turf as a starter. So I'm gonna move some of these little guys over here. Oh, I'm gonna grab that little guy though. I do want this piece there. There, I like this. This right away you can just see it's gonna make a great forest space. Like all those little bits. And again, white glue is your best, like PVA glue is your best basing material. It's your best non-toxic one. It'll take a while to dry. So you may be like me and just choose to use super glue if you're in a hurry. Now I need to figure out, okay, what's my first substrate? I think I might use the slate because it's a little bit, I think, finer than my standard gravel. Now I'm going to grab my gravel and kind of compare and get an idea of that. I also have a bunch of static grass down here, but I'm not sure. I might use one tuft of static grass, but not a lot. Hey, Miniatures Den, how's it going? I am messing around with some basing on the Centaur here. We did a wash and determined that his base was kind of like flat. So I dug out some moss bits and awesome little tendril things that my fiance has, because I totally raid his basing supplies because all is fair in love and miniatures. Except brushes. Don't ever steal your fiance's brushes. This is not a joke. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you. Luca, it's the Paca Nation. The Paca Nation invasion. So I was just comparing some of my basing materials to see what I might want to use as a substrate. Because when you are going to build up basing material, you probably should start with the finest layer first. You can either use like crushed like grass stuff as your base, or you can work with a real fine sand. This brown sand is a little bit finer than the crushed slate that I have here. So, hello. Hey, everybody. Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out how I want to do this base. Like, the point of the Centaur basing is really, I want to get it done and get it looking kind of cool, but I don't want to have to put a ton of work into it. This is not a model that I set out wanting to put a ton of work into. Unlike some models where we did like a lot of green work, like Kitty. Kitty's got a nice dungeon floor now, a step and a dungeon floor. We did that last week. And then we were just basing, we're doing a lot of basing because I'm actually wrapping up a bunch of models, but we were figuring out a nice ruined, kind of rocky ruins base for this this mage just yesterday that I blocked in with cork. And then we're going to go in with green stuff and more basing materials. So yeah, the Pacas, just to let you know what we've been covering lately. But today I just want to dress up. He's got kind of a forest base with some sculpted roots. The shine you see is just the wash that I did to kind of bring out his details and seal the surface so that I could start working over it. Because it was bones material. But yeah, so I like all these little tendrils of mosses that I dug out of David's moss bin. And I think they're going to make a great kind of foresty base. I'm not going to care about really covering over a lot of what is here because it's pretty rough, and I'll try to leave things like this tree root here because that's actually, I can see that's decently, like it's clean, like I can paint that pretty well. Some of the tree roots over here though are really flattened down into stuff, and so I don't know that I'll actually preserve those. I might just put regular forest litter over the top. But I do want a bit of a substrate, so what I can do is I can try to separate out, and this is the problem with having a mixed gravel mix. Normally I love having a mix, but when you're trying to just like put down a finer substrate, it can be a real pain in the butt. However, I can just reach in and grab a mostly small rocks, just using a little lid or another plastic container. Could use a blister pack top. I just want to separate out a little bit of finer gravel. So I can start with this. And I've got a couple of bigger rocks in there, and that's fine. They can be in there. And then I'm going to work up and do an irregular pattern of more of this, and I'm going to start putting these guys on, and then I'm probably going to add a bit of grass here and there, just little bits of it. And we'll see how that works. And then I'm going to paint it all, or at least paint bits of it. Now, when you do basing materials, the reason that I paint them, and some people disagree, some people do not paint their basing materials, but I do find that because you've like set up a model with a particular like lighting effect, right? You're painting it, and you've got your NMM or whatever, and it's all painted, so it all looks consistent. When you add a natural material onto the base, if you don't paint it, it tends to look weird, out of place, out of scale, or at worst, it makes the model look weird because the model is painted with stylistic effects like NMM, but then you've got very natural effects here. So essentially, it kind of throws the eye and it looks weird. So to get around that, you don't have to paint the entire thing, especially with some of these spiky mosses where you really want to keep some of their characters, so you don't want to glob them up with paint. But you do want to at least highlight and maybe shade around the bottoms of them a bit, just to kind of bring them into the same world as the model is. So they're not like jarring or looking weird. Oh, thanks, Unremarkable. Yeah, he's cool. He turned out cool. I'm very happy with him in general. So now we just need to get this basing finished, and then he can go and visit Ron at ReaperCon. Unlike me, 2 days, Pocket Nation, 2 days until I leave to get my puppy, my new puppy. I fly out early Friday morning, so I'm super excited to get my new puppy. I'm going to drive her back from the breeder, flying out and then driving back. So it's going to be an odyssey, but like it's going to be cool. So happy. All right, so let's get to this then. I'm going to use some super glue because I'm impatient, and also on stream we don't have a lot of time for white glue to dry. So let's get on ye old glasses. To apply gravel into a base like this strategically, while I keep some of the stone details and stuff, I'm going to actually use the same trick we kind of used yesterday. I'm going to grab a piece of paper, cardstock, or a sticky note, and I'm going to just bend it into a little funnel. And what I use is I think I'm going to cut up a piece of card. I need it to be kind of a shallow trough to reach into in there. So grab my scissors. My tool drawer is right here, so that's handy. Yeah, puppy time, and then we'll have a puppy cam. So I'm going to cut just a more narrow part of this cardstock. Let me actually zoom out so that we can talk about this. I want it to be shallow so that when I bend it into a V, I can fit it into those areas. So, and we're only going to be working with little pieces of gravel. Also, if I do the cardstock, I have the advantage of being able to score it very lightly. And scoring it makes it easier to bend in a straight line. If you guys didn't know that trick, it's a simple little trick. I just pretty much ran the X-Acto knife really lightly down the back of the cardstock. And I think this is watercolor paper. So I've made a little trough that I can essentially use to direct my basing stuff into exactly the areas I want. And if I decide that if these sides are a little bit tall, I can trim them down a little bit with the scissors so that they fit more precisely. Got to make sure not to load up too much basing material if you do this so that it doesn't spill out where you don't want it. We're not going to do the entire stream for the puppy, but on Friday of next week, we should arrive home either Wednesday night or Thursday morning, so I won't be on Thursday next week, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, obviously. But I will be on Friday, and that'll be the puppy's first stream, and I'll have her little cam hooked up over here. Tomorrow is that kind of on my list to set up the puppy cam. All right, so we've got a nice little trough thing. Yay! But yeah, so now I can use this, and I can get it loaded. Loaded with a little bit of sand, and then I grab my glue. I'm going to just put this right over here, and it'll kind of sit nicely. There we go. Got my sand loaded up. If I want to take the big rocks out at this point, it's the easiest thing in the world to just grab a tweezers or whatever. And where did I put my... Darn it, I know I had a pliers over here, but I somehow put them somewhere else because me. Dang it. I always misplace tweezers. Like, it never fails. Never ever fails. So I tend to use my my flush cutters. So yeah, you could use your side cutters and just kind of grab the little grab the little rocks and move them if you don't want them, you know, put them back in their big bin. If you just want to make sure you get small bits of sand and no big stuff. Now, if you're doing stones, you're kind of doing it in reverse. Like if you decided to do bigger rocks on the base, in that case, you want the stones to appear buried. So you would actually glue down your stones beforehand, your big ones, and then you would build up other debris around them. But that would be like when you're really working with large like boulders and stuff, if you're trying for that effect, because you really do need them to look buried. So I'm just going to grab some of the bigger rocks out of here. There we go. All right. Much better. Yeah, I mean, the puppy is the type, the puppy's going to be up for like 20 minutes and then she's going to be asleep. So doing an entire puppy stream is actually not in the cards. Also, if I started doing that, then you guys would refuse to watch me unless I was doing a puppy stream, and that's totally counterproductive. But the puppy cam will be on, you know, while we do stuff. So she's got to get acclimated to being in here when I stream anyway, so I'm not going to leave her alone. Yeah, you know it's true, Quindy. They would totally, like... Now, I do have a long snozzle, so I could clear out my long snozzle, and probably I should do that. I've got a little bit of a clog in it. If you have the Loctite, you've got a long nozzle on that naturally. If you use their super glues, some of the tester stuff will come with an applicator. Zap-A-Gap tends to come with one of these that I just have to unclog every once in a while. And this allows you to be, of course, precise about your placement of your glue, which is never a bad thing. So I think I want to do... I'm going to place a little bit of debris. So let's put a little bit of glue back here. Little dot. Blob next to that bigger stone. Let's get closer now. Next to that bigger stone there. And now, I really needed a tweezers, but since I was silly and lost it. Ah! My moss is not working. Non-functional moss. We can place that roughly right where we want it. Kind of press it down. Move it around that little rock. And see if that's going to work. Sometimes natural materials don't stick down well with super glue because they're very springy. Let me move this. Let me get my sculpting tool out so that I can... And that's why a lot of people use PVA glue. So I've got that kind of curling around that rock there. So I'm going to do a little bit of this. Then I'm going to do a little bit of gravel that I'm going to come back and do. Because this debris also, a lot of this debris I want to be somewhat buried. That one for sure. Let's bring in a little bit of glue over here. So it's nice to have the more precise applicators. You could also just, what I've done in the past, honestly, oh, now I have a lot of glue over there. What I've done in the past is to just put a puddle of glue on a plastic card piece and just use like an old sculpting tool or something that's pretty expendable to deal with it. So I added a little bit more glue to try to glue that down. I'm going to add a little bit of sand up here. And I'm just going to kind of construct as I go and just use my gut. And I might not fit all of my forest basing materials on the base, but we'll see. Actually, I think I want to grab that little feather rock. Part of me wants to go and grab my forceps that I know I have in the other room because the tweezers is better than the side cutters for this, but the side cutters is what I got. There's a little, almost like a dead fern bit, that particular... There we go. So that's a cool little piece. I'm having fun. I think I'm going to use a little bit of gravel. I honestly, yeah, like, orc skin is more of a grayish green. I'm trying to think, like the old ash gray had green in it. I don't know that we have a greenish gray per se. Let's get our little boat going on here. Lets us kind of put our gravel where we want it. We're going to let that sit there. We're kind of dusting the base with a little bit from our little trough here. I honestly would just mix it. Like something like ghoul skin. Ghoul skin is a great, a kind of a greenish grayish color. And I might just mix that with something like stormy gray or cloudy gray. The problem with greenish grays is unless you find a good military color, and there are some colors that are like grays that have a bit of green in them. The old armor gray and ash gray from the old pro paints were like that. But it wasn't enough green to really show, if you know what I mean. Because people usually are looking for just a gray, or a green, or a definite green, and so what we find is that colors that are like gray only with a little bit of a different color in it just don't sell. So this has happened to us with brownish grays and greenish grays and bluish grays. Yeah, I mean, I would just mix two colors. Grab something that's like ghoul skin or orc flesh that's a grayish green, and just put more gray into it. The color that they're talking about is orc skin. Here, let me grab it. Like this. And so orc skin actually is a kind of an ochre-y. You could probably use this for stone. Pale Lichen's too green, I think, on Fontana. Orc skin is much closer, but I would toss some gray in it. The problem with all the colors that we've got are mostly that, like I said, they're grayish greens rather than being greenish grays. Though personally, unremarkable, what I do is I like to use a bit of a dark olive green over just a regular gray, because I'll choose like a regular gray for my old gray for my stones on my swampy stuff, and then I will use something like troll flesh, which is a dark olivey color, and I'll use selective like washes and stuff. Here's troll flesh. 1 second. Stay dry. So troll flesh is a really dark green. The old swamp green was like this too. And I just use that for shading on my gray. So if you're going to do like washes or shading, you might consider doing that, just starting with a regular old gray and then putting like a real dark green over it to get that swampy wet feel. Some of my rocks are going to fall off. I'm hoping that my lichen sticks. This little lichen is sticking really well. Some of the springier lichens may fight you, so just be aware. Let me grab this and move it out of the way. There we go. Now we can see this a little bit. So we're building up different textures, especially in the flat areas. So let's do another little bit of foresty stuff right on this big flat area right here. So there's a big flat area here. So we'll put a little bit of glue. And since there is an underlying texture on this base, if we, don't get a part hit with sand or whatever, we're still fine. This is like a spiky little hedgehog of a plant. Let's see if I can get this to stick. So we're going to get that in there. And I'm going to try to get it to lie flat so that it looks like a little plant. And I think this came from a set of like mosses for terrariums or something. I don't remember how David got this stuff, but if you do look at like reptile mosses, you can kind of rip them up often and get some different effects with them. I'm going to grab a little bit more glue and my little card of my little trough of basting material. This isn't like super precise, but it lets you get more precise than you would normally be. And I'm going to bury the bottom of that so I can blend it in. And then I'm going to tip some of that off. Oh, I see part of my little foliage came off in the back here, so I need to glue that little sprig down, probably with a friend. So let's keep that there. and just kind of put some glue over it to nail it down. It's going to be right by that tree root, so it's actually pretty good placement. But yeah, with swampy bases and swampy dungeon bases and wet stuff like that, I do like to do the gray and then the dark green. And maybe a dark brown if I feel like it. So I'm just going to add a little bit of different stuff over here to make it more interesting. Some organic material. I've got a space right here next to the hoof as well, although maybe I'll do more gravel and a little bit of grass on that. Although I do have a nice clump of stuff. I need to move around the figure and make sure that I'm putting interesting stuff everywhere. So let's put a nice long one over here. So I'm going to hit a lot of the base because I want to use one of these squiggly guys. Which squiggly guy do I want to use? This squiggly guy? This one comes in a couple of different there. Get in there. And now I'm going to take my sculpting tool and kind of curve that around. You have a little time to place it before your glue starts setting. So there we go. I like that placement. That little tendril coming off looks a lot like a root. That's really cool. I like that. Yeah, pale lichen is a pale greenish, grayish green. It is a lichen color. It is a moss color. And I'm going to press it down into the glue to give it some purchase. And while I've got some wet glue over here, I might as well do some either gravel or other grassy stuff. So I really like this little plant. Mosses are fun. I don't often work with them because in the old days, a lot of the lichen that they sold you would get super dried out and crack and just generally not stick well on your base. So let's see, where's this plant going to go? Here. So I got out of using it, but when you really do want kind of a fun foresty type base, they can be good time. If they're pre-dried, like these guys have been sitting around for a long time, if they're pre-dried, they can be pretty easy to work with. I'm going to kind of use a dot of glue there. I want to make sure I have a dot of glue up here. And so I'm using a lot of super glue here and there. I need to be careful when I'm adding gravel. I need to make sure my previous glue is dry. So that's cool. That's fun. This is really, you can see how much more interesting this is making the base already. And I will work with the colors that are on there. Like I'll use some selective washes and then I'll use some selective highlights to bring out colors on these. We got a nice flat spot here. So let's see what I've got here. I'll move some of my stuff that I'm using into where you guys can see it. I've got a stick. I've got some nice kind of globs that could be like chunks of bark or, just little strands of stuff. I think I'm almost ready. I've got a spot right by this hoof and a spot over here. So I'm going to figure out a couple of last plants to use. I think maybe... I like these little curly ones though. These little curly ones are really cool. And this one maybe goes over here. Yeah, I think I'm going to use that. So this guy and this guy are my two MVPs. And we'll use the little bottle brush shaped one over here. Boop. If you get really good with your glue applicator, you just put a tiny little bit down and then work from there. I got to get this guy turned around so that I can use him. Get him in the right position. Ah, don't flip over. Bloop. There he is. That's a good one. The best blade plants. Yeah, they'll come off when you don't want them to. And it may seem like I should have just thrown down a layer of super glue and just tossed like Lichen onto here, and yeah, you could do that. It won't it won't look quite as nice. I like to kind of space out my foliage and stuff, so I like it to look nice. As long as you vary it up, it'll still look pretty random. All right, and now let's do a little bit of a plant here. This will be a curly plant. Squirrels are yelling at each other outside of my window. They should go fight over the figs in our front yard. There we go. So that's nice. So these are great, and the part of why these particular like mosses and lichens are so good is that when you cut off a little piece of it, it really is in scale for a 28mm base. Like the fineness of those fronds and stuff, that's totally in scale. So it doesn't look like you've put some big clunking thing on the base that looks wrong, right? It actually, because of the tiny little details on here, it's actually correct for a 28mm. So that's part of why I thought I would work with these guys today. Gonna get some of this stuff cleared off. I'm gonna keep these guys around. I don't know when I might want a little extra. Now I'm gonna add a little bit more of my gravel in certain places. I'm gonna fill in some areas on the outside of here. So I want a little bit of gravel next to the hoof, and I'm gonna run it down and around the front. Yeah, and then I can just scoop up. For stuff around the front, I don't need it to be really elaborate, but I can fill that in. If you wanna scooch any of the rocks like off of your base material, just use your fingernail, scooch them back onto the base itself. So we are essentially setting up a really nice disguise to totally disguise the fact that we actually used the Centaur's own base for this. Another thing, I always keep a sculpting tool around to clear, because super glue does tend to creep, and so you can use your sculpting tool to kind of scooch some of the gravel away from the model's feet. And you can just set that stuff out here. Or just rub it off on like your paper or whatever you're working with. Paper towel. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not, like, I gave figs a chance. Like, I tried them. And I like some, like, there's a fig orange jelly that I really like. But figs on their own, I'm just not a fan. Like, they're too seedy for me. All right, I'm going to get rid of these little paper cutouts. I'm going to clean up my space a little bit here. Get some of this stuff out of the way. I don't want too much debris all around for stuff to stick to and get stuck to. You know what, though? I might keep this strand of moss. I might be able to curve it around the base a little bit. I might want that one. So I'm going to keep that one strand. These other guys are too thick. And I'm going to sweep up a little bit of my gravel. When you're working with gravel and basing material, it is inevitable. It will get everywhere. Oh, there's a little piece of moss that I lost. See, some of this foliage is so micro that it's great for this scale. And if you're lucky enough to live in a place that has, you know, a lot of good parks around, you can go walking and look for bits of moss and stuff. You do want to debug it or treat it. I think AK has a solution that you can use to make, to preserve natural leaves and foliage and stuff like that, microplants. It's in their AK Dioramas book. I meant to make a note of it, and but I haven't ever used it, so Some of this stuff's just honestly just kept and dried out and, you know, deloused that way naturally. Any bugs in it have moved on. Probably unremarkable, probably. Our fig tree is super happy and it's like spreading tons of figs, but mostly I'm just leaving them for the squirrels because it's funny though, because now that some of them are ripe, every day I find a decapitated fig lying in the driveway. Like half of it will be left, and then when I come back from my walk, that half will have been yoinked by a different critter. So at least the critters enjoy the figs. And I'd rather they eat that than my strawberries, which I actually am fond of. So, yeah. Yeah, we have a little fig tree in our front yard. A fig tree and a baby orange tree that is starting to make oranges for us as we speak. Like our oranges are this big right now and green. But it's exciting. It's exciting. And then just the other day, we have 2 trees in pots. And I always just thought they were decorative trees. And I should have known better because I should have recognized the one in the back corner because I've had that kind of tree before. But it's a pomegranate tree. And it actually is starting to make a pomegranate. And then the one on the side of the house is actually, I think, an olive tree. And it started making olives. So we've got lemons, limes, figs, oranges, pomegranates, olives. Our neighbor's plum tree overhangs our backyard, so we get plums. And then we have an avocado tree that's just not fruiting yet. Yeah, this is kind of cool because I've always kind of wanted this. Like the only thing that I could want that we don't have at this point is an apple tree. Yeah, so everything is fruiting except for the avocado. The avocado is just a baby. And then we have a strawberry plant that I rescued from the back here. The previous owners had planted it in a shady area, so it was not doing very well. All right, let's put that. Trying to figure out where I want. Yeah, I think I do want this big strand back here. So let me see what I can do. Let us put down some glue and see if I can make this thing work. Kind of anchor it. I want to aim it up a little bit so it looks like some hairy plant. Then I want to anchor the base by putting gravel over it. So like if your organic matter doesn't want to cling real well, put it down, at least anchor the butt end, and then into that same puddle of glue, especially this works with super glue, but it probably would work with white glue as well. You can put some of your gravel, and that gravel is going to set up really fast in that super glue, and it'll help to anchor your plant. Ooh, an apple and a pear. Nice. Oh, they're neglected, huh? The dream Animal Crossing house. That's so funny. You're so true. You are so right. Yeah, and I'm not really thinking I want a vegetable garden because I just rather just buy the vegetables at the store. I guess I'm a heathen that way, but I do really like the fruit. And I've been taking good care of the fruit trees. Like, honestly, our lemon tree has saved us so much money because like I make my own salad dressing, and the dressing I make is a lemon vinaigrette. So whenever we need citrus, we've got our lemon and our lime tree. All right, I'm going to put even more. I'm going to put more stones over here, and I'm going to do a different size. So now let's get our scoop, our little scoop, and get our crushed shale or slate. And put some of that stuff on there. So we'll mix up our basing a little bit. The crushed slate is very flat. It's like little flakes. So it's interesting. It's a little bit different. You can kind of mix it up with the other stuff. Kind of get a mixed ground. Gonna do a little bit more gravelly stuff back here to fill this little dip where my molding putty didn't quite make enough of a disguise. I'm gonna put maybe a couple of bigger rocks in here. I wonder if this might be too big. Let's put a bigger rock down. There. Then we'll put lots of little rocks around it to make it look like it's buried. I think I got the end of my scoop dipped in super glue. Oh, we also have a chili pepper bush. I forgot to say. I never use it because they're really hot. They're not ghost pepper hot or anything, but they're definitely spicy chilies. Um, our our gardener is Mexican, and they're actually a bush from like they were a cutting from one of his grandma's bushes he planted because the previous owner really liked hot stuff. So I haven't used one in a. Although we do make Indian food, so I may try one cautiously just to see how hot it makes things. But I'm kind of a wimp when it comes to heat. Like I used to have a pretty high tolerance when I lived in Texas, but it's not something I seek out necessarily. Like it's not a type of like quality of foods. Like some people love the hot stuff, and I'm just not. It's not really where my happy place is. So actually, to bridge this little collection of rocks that are sculpted with my rocks that I'm planting, I'm going to put a little bit of glue over here. Grab my makeshift tweezers and grab a couple of these rocks from down here. Boop. Ah! Unfortunately, not having proper tweezers means that I'm having some issues. But some of these little rocks from my tray are really in scale with the rocks that are sculpted, so it'll disguise. You won't be able to tell, ideally, after painting, what is placed and what is sculpted. There. And then I want one more little rock. Come on. And now that little rock doesn't want to come off. Come on, little rock. There it is. There we go. And I'm going to drop a little bit of super glue just in here to kind of cement those guys down. There. They'll all cling together and glob up and become a rocky family. Let's see here. What else can I do over here? I like this root here, so I'm keeping it. I do want to disguise a little bit of some of this. One thing I can do, since that's putty, is I should be able to shave it down. Yep. I used flexible sculpting putty for this exercise so that I could easily modify it. So that scraping away where that's coming up white, that's just me kind of interrupting this little edge that I inadvertently left. So that way I can make it blend in better. And now I can take my scoop and finish. I've got some glue down here. So just like kind of going back and forth, and I'm just looking at each area of the base. When you're doing basing like this that has like some fun little features, like it becomes kind of like Easter eggs, like you want to place little interesting bits of stuff, whether it's jumbled rocks or a fun little frond or whatever. You want to have every part of the base have something interesting on it. You're not trying to make something distracting. You're just trying to make the base interesting so that it's not just kind of there. So that's what we've done here is we've introduced a lot of interesting three-dimensional things, and now we're adding in more stones and stuff. So we're just spicing things up a little bit so that the base is more fun. And then when we paint it, we'll be able to take the bones material and details that I'm leaving and work it all in with the plant material and everything else. And if we paint everything, it will look like it belongs together. I'm going to do another bead of glue all along this side here, fill in some more gravel. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to do a little bit of slate just with my fingers, and then I'm going to do get my scoop of rocks and apply that. notice shiny spots from super glue drying with nothing on it, and that's fine because you can paint over super glue just fine. You just need to make sure that it is thoroughly dry before you do, or you will muck up your brush. We've all done it by being impatient at one point in our careers, but yeah, try to avoid that. Now we've got some fun. This is starting to really come together. I think I like it. I need to do something here in the front. I need to put more gravel in the front. Alrighty. More gravel. And then we're almost set. I need to decide if I'm going to put some static grass on this. A little bit of slate bits. And when I'm doing basing especially, I mean always here on the show, I work on this sheet of gray paper. But with basing materials, it's even more key just because then I can just lift up this piece of paper and tilt all of the extra gravel and crap that's falling various places. I can just tilt that right back into the container. So it's very handy to work over a piece of paper or foam or something like that, where you can just pick that up, tilt it, you know, curl it together and pour it right back into the container. It's a very handy thing. All right, let's see here. I really feel like maybe I can see a couple places I could put grass. And I might want to put some on top of my gravel. I tend to like to paint my gravel first and then do static grass and then touch up the static grass. Yeah, it's cool. Like it definitely is much more foresty now. Like you could get just from those little roots and stuff, you could get the feel of a forest, but now you're really getting it. So now we really do need to paint it all though. So I'm going to wait for my super glue to set. I'm going to clean up my surface here. I did not use some of my little root tendrils and things over here, so I'm going to put those guys back into the root or the moss container. So much fun little stuff. I'm glad David had this. He whipped it out the other day. He's like, I don't have any place to put this. And I'm like, I will steal it for you. I mean, hide it? I mean, put it away. That's what I meant to say. So yeah, so that's looking pretty good. Yeah, exactly right, Quindy. I will steal that from you. I mean, put it away. All right, so there we go. Now I can just tilt those guys back into there and put that in there. I think I'm done with my stones, so just kind of sweep them up. At the end of the session after the stream, I'll just pluck this piece of gray paper up and just pour whatever's left into their containers. There. Just handy. Close up all my stuff so I don't knock it over, because yeah, that's been done as well. Little trough. I'll probably keep my little, actually I could probably put that into my gravel thing so I have my applicator in my gravel tub. Would be handy, right? Plan for the future. There. Okay. So now I need to decide what kind of color I am going to go with this. And often I will start with kind of a substrate of a very dark brown, and then I'm going to work it up with more of lighter browns and some grays and creams. So that is an option. Let us see. Muddy brown's a good one. I often will start with walnut if I want it to be very dark at the start. You can work it up quite well from walnut, and it does have the advantage of like filling in a lot of the space. But I did start out with like Rogue Shadow, so maybe I will actually use a Rogue Shadow, my same Rogue Shadow wash as I did before. I could use over this, so this dark brown. All I need to do is kind of freshen it up with another drop of Rogue Shadow and some sealer. So this mix I did at the beginning is what I used to seal the base and put a layer down to bring out the details in the bones material, like the tree root here. So that wash over the top just helped me see everything a little bit better. It also put a layer of paint over the top of the bones material, so it was easier for other stuff to stick to it. But now we can use that same type of mix, although I think we're going to go more for a wash here. So we'll do my 2 drops of the actual liner paint, 4 drops of a brush on sealer, and 2 drops of water. And we'll mix that up. It's going to make it a little waterier. Now, putting paint over this, there's a couple ways to seal basting material. I talked about the PVA glue method yesterday. Putting a thin layer of white glue, not school glue, but if you're going to use Elmer's all-purpose, or go use wood glue is also a good basing glue to keep around. It's essentially a modification on PVA that's stronger. But paint and white glue actually have a lot in common, and so you can just use a sealer or a paint itself to like paint over your gravel, and it helps to lock it in place. But a lot of basing people will use a layer of white glue mixed with just a little water, also because that tends to fill in some of the texture and make it look more organic. It gets more of an effect like a texture paste and less like just putting gravel on the base. But I'm going to do it this way, and because I'm not sure about my super glue status, I'm going to use my crappy mixing brush, which is already completely brutalized. And I'm going to paint kind of around my little foresty bits here, my moss bits. Mostly I want to hit the gravel to kind of make it blend in, and I want to give it kind of a dark shadow between the grains of the gravel. So that when I dry brush it, like the details will come out, but everything else will be in shadow. So putting this over around, and like I said, using a craptastic brush helps prevent you from having a horrible tragedy if you accidentally have a puddle of super glue left over that has not yet set. So we'll bring this rogue shadow around, and because this gravel itself has such a warm brown tone, this gravel I think is old Games Workshop, to be honest, the tan colored gravel. I like that it when you put a dark brown wash over it, it just makes kind of a warm dark brown color, which is a good earth color. But if you're using a gravel that is a totally different color and not one that works well with what your color palette is, then just feel free to put not a wash but much more solid layer of paint over it. So most of my foliage stuff doesn't need anything right now. I am going to go right up to the base of this guy, this big frond, and shade around its base. So it's rare that I would put a wash over like Plant Life that I'm using. I might take a little bit of a brush and selectively shade some of it if I feel it needs it. But for now, I'm just going to start with this. Just kind of shade around the bottom where it's coming out of the soil, and then I'm going to rely more on highlighting it to make it look in scale. Alright, another big blob of I'm going to paint over my rocks. And I'll end up bringing up a lot of my rocks, probably with different colors. Probably I'll go more gray with them. Again, I could put a little bit of color like around the base of some of this vegetation, although I did paint over that little frond right there. He got nuked. Alright, right, and I've got a little rock that got stuck in here. He totally just got stuck on there, so I can tip him off. Though I could glue him on if I wanted to, but I'm going to finish this area first. And since this is a wash, I don't really have to worry about if I get a little bit onto my plastic base. I can always paint over my plastic base if I need to. Alright, and I can touch that up. Alright, and while you're doing this, you will notice sometimes little stuff will come up. So some of your basing materials may show themselves to not be as attached as you had hoped. Just kind of let them dry out. Like I had a little piece of lichen come up there. I'm going to just let it set in the midst of this wash, and that may be enough to glue it down. Some of these colors I like a bit, so like some of these little greenish browns and this pale guy sitting out here. I like the color, so I'm going to keep it. I'm not going to try to paint over it. And this brown bit here that I like, I'm going to keep that. I don't have any gravel here on the back near the tail. That was a mistake, but you know what? I could paint it more rocky back there to show that it is, maybe imply that it's more of a stone area. Or I could go in and do more gravel, but let's just paint that like it's dark. I mean, it's going to be shadowed because the horse's rump is over it, so we'll just make that look like a stone coming up. And where some of these edges are showing up, I'm going to paint them more like roots. So that wasn't too much time. That was that took us a while, but we've got some cool foliage that's definitely three-dimensional now, and we just had to pretty much just place a few tufts here and there and go pretty organic. Try to vary up a little bit of our textures, leave a little bit of our natural ground. So some of these models just probably aren't going to be done in time for ReaperCon unless I finish them off screen. But what I would do from here on out is I would take probably a medium brown, probably like shield brown or earth brown, and I would start highlighting, and I would leave this dark brown. Like I'd probably mix up a full strength puddle of Rogue Shadow or some walnut or whatever other dark brown I wanted to use. And I'd make sure to like shade areas like there next to that tree root. But I'd be painting to highlight a lot of the rest of this. I'd highlight, probably dry brush the gravel. And I might also use a color like cloudy gray to do a dry brush on some of the stones and gravel as well. If there's an area that I want to suggest is stone underneath, like if I want to suggest that this area is like a rock that's kind of just peeking up out of the turf, then I want to paint that in more of a gray color to show that. I would still use my dark brown to shade it. And then I'd bring up my colors typically with some tans and creams and maybe even a lighter gray. And I tend to like build this up. This one I didn't keep very nice. Like I try to keep it more pristine, and this one got a bit dirtied up. When I do accidentally super glue over and mar my beautiful black plastic base, I just do paint over it. It's pretty easy. I like to keep the plastic if I can at all, just because I think I like the effect a bit better if it's nice and smooth. But if I have to paint it, I have to paint it. But yeah, this one stayed okay. Like, it's not bad, but I do see parts where the super glue is definitely discoloring the rim here. Stuff like that. And that can totally happen. That's one of the problems with super glue is, yeah, it's fast, but it does create artifacts, and it does cause, what it causes is often it'll cause gravel and other stuff to not lie as naturally as they would if we would have used white glue. So yeah, so now we need highlights and stuff. So we'll see. We're getting toward the end of the stream. We got maybe 10 minutes. So, and this stuff needs to dry, but I can start highlighting some of my plants. So I'm really gonna, I'm going to want some greens on these plants, a little bit stronger than they are. Obviously, a lot of them don't have a lot of green left because they're dried, right? But we can get around that. I want to grab, I need to ask myself how vibrant I want it. I probably want to use just a lighter, warmer, nicer, like kind of in line with our olive up here. We want to use some of that type of color down here. So I am actually going to grab the color we mentioned just a little while ago on the stream, which is Troll Hide. And I'm going to use a lighter green to bring that up. I'll probably use actually Knoll Hide, and then I'm going to mix an off-white, like a linen white or a creamy ivory or something, into this to take down the color a bit. But those are good organic plant colors to go with the olive of the Centaur. Probably more jungly colors and less foresty. I could go more of a traditional green with this. It would just, it would run the risk of clashing just a wee bit with the olive on the Centaur himself. So I'm going to try to work with these guys and see what I can mix and do some quick applications just to show you guys what I'm doing. So first I want to get my troll, and Troll Hide is probably going to be a kind of a shadow color or a breaking up color on some of these plants. If I can actually get it to come out of its tube. Let's back up. All right, so we got our happy little base. And while I'm setting up these colors, of course, the base will be drying. So we ended up not doing any green work on this base at all. We ended up just using what I was using last night was a flexible modeling paste to kind of fill in part of the gap around the outside so that I wouldn't have a hard edge to work with when I wanted to fill with the gravel. Come on, Troll Hide. You were my friend. You're one of my favorite colors. You need to, like, come out of your bottle. Ah, there we go. Not too much of it is coming out of the bottle. Typical. So I'm going to put my Troll Hide right next to my Rogue Shadow here, and I may put a little bit of the Rogue Shadow into this green. I'm going to make a mix of the Troll Hide, about 50-50, with the Knoll pelt. Painting the base edges is the whole reason you paint minis. You're funny. Alright, so we'll get a little bit of this in here, and then we'll mix a highlight, and then we'll at least paint a bit. I'm going to put a bit of Knoll pelt down, and I'm going to reach for my, let's use Creamy Ivory, actually. I tend to use like a color like this, like a buff color. Creamy Ivory is a really good one. Bleached Linen's a little too white. I think not really what I want here right now. Cairn Stone would be a good match as well, although it is a little gray. Cairn Stone from the Pathfinder line is a really nice color for this sort of thing as well. But I want a little warmer, so I'm going to go with my Creamy Ivory. Yeah, right. Most of the time I hear the opposite from that, right? The whole, I'm scared to base my minis. I don't often hear the only reason I paint is to base my minis. All right, so I'm gonna thin these just with a little bit of water. I want the paint to be pretty thick here, actually, so I don't have to go over these more than once. So it's more like a 4-to-1 paint to water. If I need my shadow color to be a little thinner, then I'll deal with that in a little bit. I'm actually going to mix this Troll Hide into my Rogue Shadow here to create a really dark green, dark brownish, blackish green. That'll be a nice shading color. Sometimes we just think about painting. Yes, this is true. Sad but true. This didn't come up quite as light as I wanted, so I'm going to actually mix up this color and then mix back into it. I do this a lot, as you guys know, when I'm creating triads. I'm just mixing my highlight into my midtone into my shadow, and all that stuff. So now I've got a nice triad of warm green colors that I can work with. So I'm going to grab a real brush now, because I'm sure at this point that my super glue is set. Grab my glasses. That's you. Just like imagining what it will look like. This is your happy place. All right, so let's take some of this blackish green, and now paint doesn't, the reason I'm keeping the paint thicker is that it tends to resist sticking to natural fibers, and we're not priming these first. If you do want to use one of these natural plants and you really want to repaint the whole thing instead of just tinting what you already have, then I'd recommend actually using a primer on some of these little guys. But I just want to kind of change the color a little bit. Want to introduce some dark greens, want to introduce some medium greens. So I'm going to start out with dark colors, just like I would on the figure, and I might keep a little bit of this golden color that the plant has. Probably going to paint this dark, this strand coming up, as if it's like a stick, right? It tends to look more, it'll look more like a stick if I paint it dark. And then I can come in with my lighter green colors. And so I'm keeping the paint thicker because that's going to cover, it's going to stick to the plant life better. And the color is going to show. If you put too thin of paint on the plant life, a lot of plant life is just going to try to shrug that off. It's going to be a little bit water repellent. And the paint isn't going to want to stick. So I'm getting more green. Coming over here and getting this guy with a little bit of a highlight. And like I said, you don't have to get everything. You can just, instead of shading, you could just highlight and bring in some different colors that way on the plant. But when we highlight it, we start to see, just like with a miniature, we start to see the details come out. Bring in a little bit more light color here. Now it looks like a cool, weird plant. And it's better, it's painted like, you know, like everything else is painted. So maybe a little bit of the natural material is still showing through, but that's fine. So now when I come in with some dark brown to get the earth underneath, let's just paint this little part of it. So I'm actually going to use this greenish black color to mock in some of this ground color. Decided I wanted to muck with it that way. Then we can bring in a little bit of a highlight with a lighter brown. Let's grab leather brown. Come here, leather brown. Leather brown and cloudy gray. I like to use a mix of browns and grays on bases. I find browns and grays and then up to creams. All right, so now I've got a little bit of gray and a little bit of... Now I will grab, I do have a dry brushing brush over here somewhere, if I can find it. Let's see here. I think I've got my, I'm gonna have to reach for my flat over here. That one's too big. That one's all right. So I can use a flat like this if I just use the edge. For the gravel, I totally would do dry brushing. Or stippling. So that's a thing too, right? We can grab our cardstock, grab a little bit of this paint, get it to where it's like more stippleable. And we can utilize that as well. Instead of a dry brush, we can start just bringing in a little bit more brown colors over things. And I can just put it over almost everything. Just start to bring up some earth colors. Ah, that's the problem with the white card. You can't see it. All right, let's do that. So just bringing up a little bit more color on here. I can actually dry brush. I can stipple. I can, let's just use a little bit of these guys. I dipped a little bit of my gray into my tan. And then I can actually dry brush if I want to. Usually I use the narrow side of the brush for that because this is a bigger brush. But I'll get some of that color up onto like the lip of here. And I'll kind of stipple it over into the area beyond as well. I go back and forth a lot between my darks and my lights when I'm doing a base like this. So I'll bring in this lighter color and some grays and stuff, and then I'll go back in with my shadow. Let's go over here and use a smaller brush. Impending Luca? All right. I will do just a real quick highlight here, and we can swap over to the master alpaca himself. So then if we just come in and we hit a little bit of this with some grays. And some browns. But I do like to vary the ground color. So I do swap back and forth between grays and browns and mixes thereof. So there, down there, now that we've got this uniform gravel color has been covered up and we have a painted plant, now this looks natural. Like, do you see how the plant now, it looks like it belongs on the base because it's been painted just like everything else on the base is painted. So now the grasses don't look like they're just sticking up like that guy is just an artificial thing. This looks like it's part of the base. And that's why I feel like painting your basing materials is super important. Like, I really do feel that it helps to create that illusion of like microflora on your base when you put just that little bit of extra effort in to paint and detail the plant life, that even when you're using mosses and especially when you're using natural things from the outside world, to just kind of disguise them and make them look as they're painted like a part of your base. So yeah, so you can kind of see the difference between like these guys that are just like all one color and just kind of sitting there, and this guy which is actually highlighted and shaded. So yeah. So there you go. So by the time I'm done with all of these guys, everything will be worked in and faded in, and it'll all look like it belongs. And now I'm going to drop my Centaur, but it's okay because he's bones. He bounces. So there we go, guys. So we set up a different kind of base today. We used different techniques. We used a lot of natural moss and plant bits taken from nature. And kind of integrated that with some gravel and different sorts of gravel and sand archetypes to create something that looked natural and foresty for our Centaur. I think he's looking pretty good. I don't remember if we're going to get to him before ReaperCon. At this point, I've kind of lost track. So like tomorrow is the mage with the scroll, and then Friday when I get back it'll be Kidde's basing, and then I may skip. Normally it would be Madame Delia, but we finished her. I may skip and do the bust because I want to finish her. But yeah, so we probably won't get to this guy again. I'll have to finish him off screen. But you guys get the idea of what I was doing. So there we go. Yeah, I think this is a good base for this model. I agree, Major. Thanks. All right, let's get over to the master alpaca himself, Luca. Yeah, not released yet. Yeah, this is part of the Greek Odyssey set from Bones 5. Yep. We're going. All right, everybody, have fun, and I'll see you all tomorrow for the last day before I leave to get my new puppy. Woo! All right, have fun.